Morgan, it is Friday, and I heard there's this thing going on called the B2B Power Hour. Have you heard of it?
I don't know. This is like my first time really hearing of this thing, but yeah, apparently it happens every Friday at this time. Who knew?
Is that what happens when you get stuck between that and a brick wall?
Uh, yes, welcome everyone. This is a new background I'm deploying in a new space. Hello everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Friday, Nick. It was Thanksgiving yesterday here in the States. So I hope everybody who celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday had a lovely time. I certainly did. Canadian Thanksgiving's earlier in the year.
Yeah, like I think it was 4 to 6 weeks ago.
Oh wow. Okay. Weird.
Maybe it's because we just have more to be thankful for. I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe
or
that's
is
going to
it
be the question
less?
of the
I don't
day. I don't know. Well, your Thanksgiving also is now makes today Black Friday. So what are
It's
people
true.
really thankful? No, just kidding.
They're very thankful for the deals that you get this
Ooh.
morning. Well, if you're here, drop a hi in chat. We'd love to say hi to you. And Nick, do we have a question of the day?
You know what? I was thinking about making a silly one, but
Mm-hmm.
you know what? In the spirit of being thankful and
Oh
appreciating
yes.
life, what is the one thing that you are the most thankful for? In the spirit of
Hmm.
Thanksgiving. What's that one thing?
We'd love to know. Drop it in chat. Um, what is the one thing like? Yeah, what's the top thing I'm thankful for right now? I mean, the show.
I thought you were
We've
gonna
been
say your
able
new
to.
office.
No, we've been able to do a lot out of this show. I've been feeling pretty grateful for that this year, and thankful for, by extension, everybody here who comes and shows up and says hi and drops comments and listens in and um, drops chats and questions and all the rest of it. So very thankful for what we've been able to do because of this show, Nick.
You know what? What I am the most thankful for is your guys' DMs.
He gets a lot of them.
But it but it's not even just a lot. It's just people are so raw and real when they message me, either telling me about they need when they asking for help or they're telling me about how they're winning. And I know I don't talk about it too much, but it really makes my day to go and see all of you guys succeed and that you trust us enough to go and share it with us. And that means the world to us.
That's
Well, at
awesome.
least to me, I'm not going to speak for Morgan.
Miriam says family, love it. Ash on YouTube says health and a great team. Love all those
Mm.
things. Definitely grateful for health as well. Riley says he
Riley.
is the one that DMs.
I will give
True.
Riley credit. Not only does he DM me, but he shares the show like crazy. And he's even got
Mm.
family coming now. So, like, we're talking about the real all star here.
The real all star. Thank you. Yes. Well, I thought it was appropriate for today because we have a few shows through the end of the year, and we're going to be taking a couple of weeks off near the end of the year. So I know what
I wasn't
breaks.
notified.
This
Man,
is
our
your idea,
boss is
Nick.
just.
I know you can razz me, but it was your idea. Um, so we're going to knock out some amazing, amazing topics over the next few weeks as we head into December. And today, after Thanksgiving, in the heights of Black Friday shopping, we wanted to talk about old school sales and how
Old school
things
sales.
are changing as we come into the new year. And this is from our own observations, our own clients, our own work with people, also our many conversations with all of you who come to the show and many, many executives who we interact with out on LinkedIn, as we've been thinking about what needs to change and what is going to change, whether or not you like it, as we come into the new year.
You know what it makes me think of?
Yeah.
So we got these cool like new wearables that do a whole bunch of really
Yes.
neat things, right? So when I started selling, we didn't have any of those cool tech. So what did I get taught to do? I didn't get taught to do much, but that's
But
besides the point. It was
what
throwing
did you
against the wall
figure
and see
out
what
to do?
sticks. But it was vertical. Pick your
Mm,
vertical. Go and look at head count, prioritize the biggest deals, and start dialing and try to win on the phone.
mhm.
But what changed? And I think this is one of the most interesting pieces is for some reason the most junior people are now calling the most senior people and trying to go and book meetings. That I don't get. But the other one is we have things like wearables that can send signals back to something so you can actually see signs and symptoms of pain without having to have a conversation. So my question would be, why are we trying to win on the phone when it's been shown that people don't want to talk to you unless you have a reason to reach out other than something selfishly that we want.
I love the wearables analogy because it's like we are awash in data, and it's not just wearables. It's what LinkedIn can tell you. It's what SEMrush can tell you. It's what all of your intent platforms can tell you. Like we are just awash in all of these data points, and yet our prospecting strategies have not changed that much.
Nope, they look identical.
Yeah, because when you
Nothing.
started in enterprise sale or when you started in sales, it wasn't enterprise sales, but do you think that prospecting is that much different today?
No, and even when my first intro to enterprise sales, when I had like the tiniest little bit of training, they throw you into a room for 2 or 3 days, ambush you with information, you walk out with maybe 10% that you remember and nothing changes, and woo, check a box. But
Yay.
yeah, but they always told us you got to go for power fast. That is the goal. Well, back then, nobody was calling leadership as much. They weren't getting as much email. Email is relatively new when you think about it. And so somebody reaching out, they would take that call. But as things got cheaper, especially SaaS and cloud,
Mm.
anybody could create a product, right? So what happened? The amount of competition just exploded. You ever tried to buy shoes lately?
It's
No, it's no,
insane.
like, but seriously, have you tried to go buy shoes like for anything lately?
Yes.
I went to Sport Check and I wanted to just go and buy new runners and some shoes for the gym,
Mhm.
and there was so many different choices that it was overwhelming. Well, if that's shoes, think of how an executive feels when we're calling them, trying to ask them about problems, and there's 17 different choices, and your main message is we're the best. We're the number one. G2 said. So what?
Who cares? There's a lot of number ones.
And so what I really want to talk about today, Morgan, and I'll just kind of and we'll jump in a little bit more, is our leaders' choice of go to market is really the leading cause of layoffs and missed targets. And did they adjust with buyer preferences, or are they just keeping status quo? And with that, a more modern approach is cheaper, aligns with buyer preferences, and really builds a better business. But maybe we need to go and talk about what is traditional selling
Mm.
and
Mhm.
really highlight what changed. And you had a really interesting perspective when it came to economics,
Mhm.
which is so ironic that that almost never comes up in sales. It's like, well, how much are you selling? Not did we actually sell anything that was worth selling at all?
Right. Well, and it's funny to even start here as you were talking about more choices because I remember back in 2011, 2010, I think I built my first email automation sequence with MailChimp, ActiveCampaign. It was so new and it was in B2C. It had not really hit B2B yet. I was doing B2C work and it was revolutionary because you would get 40 to 70% open rates on like follow-on emails, crazy
40 to
click-throughs.
70 on an
Yeah,
automation back
because it
then.
was
Holy
it was
crap.
so new. It was amazing. And not just on e-commerce, but even like little shops and stores. It doesn't even have to be like big e-commerce. And I think we've been sort of caught in this mythos that just more is better, basically. That let's just automate more, let's automate more calls, more emails, etc. And I think it essentially comes back to the economic models that companies have pursued since I would say since the pandemic started. And that was because money was cheap. I mean, the federal funds prime rate was near 0%, which means if you think of like a domino effect, it means like how much money is flooding into private markets because they can't get safe bets that earn any money, right? Because the safest bet is a government bond. And if the government bond gets you 0.5% over 3 years, you're going to look elsewhere for a return on your investment. So all this cheap money floods into the system. And so they go and raise rounds and you get these unicorns that, frankly, have billion-plus-dollar valuations without nothing behind it or hardly any profitable business model, basically raising money to scale. And we see this in like project management softwares, even like Monday, Asana, ClickUp. Some of them are public, some of them are still privately held, but they go through all of the alphabet soup of raising money. Why? Well, because they're burning a lot of money, right? So they need more money to fill in
The
the
pothole
the
they
the
created by trying to
pothole that
sell.
correct, that they were incapable of selling basically. And sure, is this true in every company in every industry? No. Does it seem hyper localized in SaaS companies? Yes. And tech at large, which is why there's been a lot of layoffs and tech shakeups and all the rest of it. And ultimately, what that means is if you have a big pile of money sitting around as a company, or you have access to a big pile of money laying around ready for it to be invested from some venture capital firm, you are going to make decisions around your go to market that maybe are not as disciplined as you would be if you couldn't raise any money at all. And what's happening right now, I think, and what I see is that the discipline has been reintroduced to the system forcibly in many ways. Because as interest rates have climbed back up, all the money gets vacuumed back up into bonds. Do you like that noise effect? Gets sucked back into bonds
Gonna
as
turn down my
as
volume now? No, I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
And then there's less money in the venture firms. There's less money in private markets to invest. So it's harder to raise your next round. It's harder to borrow money at a cheap rate. And now I think companies are coming to terms with, why do we need 30 different project managers? Why do we need 100 different sellers? Right? Like all of these staffing decisions are sort of fueled by this idea that scale is easy and cheap. And now scale is hard and expensive. So we that macroeconomic shift, I think, is changing a lot, not just how buyers buy, which is the majority of the conversation that happens on LinkedIn. Oh gosh, the economy is changing. They're more cost sensitive, they're more price sensitive. I don't think they're actually that much more price sensitive than they were 6 to 8 months ago.
I
It's
got
just
numbers on
different
that.
environment. Go for it, Nick. He's got some hard data.
So I did a whole bunch of research for this because it got really interesting and I didn't want to lean on dogmatism like everyone else. I wanted to actually have facts instead of just calling my opinions facts. So over 30% of salespeople say that budget is the number one reason that deals fall apart. Guess what number two is?
Priority?
So yeah, I would say yes, and it's timing,
Timing. Okay, yeah.
followed by decision making, 18%, value, 12%, and connection, 12%. So
Interesting.
is that like the old challenger thing of like
Right.
the connection being what fourth or fifth? So
Mhm.
relationship sellers beware.
Yeah.
But the thing that came going back to your money conversation that I found really interesting, sales leaders believe that only 50% of the clients they speak with that are on the list for whatever generic reason are actually a good fit for their product or service. 50-50. So they're saying the list that they're producing, on average, only 50% of the people are worth talking to. How many hours did it take to find that out?
No
And that's not,
kidding.
and I wouldn't necessarily put that on the salespeople,
Mm-mm.
especially if you're
No,
junior. How would you know?
you don't.
And sorry, you were saying how many years does it take for them to become profitable? Oh, sorry.
Right.
Never mind.
But actually, this is an interesting challenge because we usually think about selling or basically buying as a budgetary issue when the macroeconomic climate shifts. But what's important to think about is how it changes your own company's dynamics. Because if in your own company you are dependent upon venture capital money or you are dependent upon an equity investment, that means your leadership is going to try and drive more profitability, more discipline on the bottom line inside your own organization. That leads to layoffs. That also leads to, in my opinion, extremely ambitious and likely unrealistic quotas as they try and get sellers to sell more and in order to boost that profitability. But Nick, you can't just pick up the phone and call more to land some more deals.
Maybe think of Will Aiken's Tiki that came out this morning of like the savior. You're like, the sales manager coming in. Here, let me save you. Just make more calls.
Yeah.
But I think of back of being a road warrior. And Stephanie, I'm happy to go and share my sources in this page with you guys. But I was thinking about being a road warrior. And because I was 100% commission, of course they
Mhm.
weren't going to lay me off because I was stupid enough to take all the risk. But they also rewarded me better. And so I had to cover my costs. So I had to actually plan a route that was profitable
Mm.
sooner than later. And I also had to factor in like my cost of credit if I was putting on a credit card or whatever. So I went and actually was trying to find numbers for today. And pointclear.com said that digital meetings cost less. No shit. Between travel fees and meeting schedules and business between whew, between travel fees, meeting schedules, and business lunches, the average outside sales call costs $308 today. On the other hand, the average sales call for inside sales reps costs $50. I want to know what tech stack and what numbers factored in that $50. Was it just based on what their salary is and, OTE, or like how did they get to that $50? But you think about that.
Mhm.
So, we're 1/6
Mhm.
of the cost and we're sitting there. And so what are companies saying? Well, you don't need to be efficient, or you don't have to be effective, just be efficient. Officially do something that doesn't need to be done, so just dial more.
Yep.
And I think this is the problem because as we've learned, and I'll give full credit to coining this, is like behind Morgan, we hit the brick wall. And that brick wall is mental spam filters. We've all had somebody walk up to us and say something and you're like, why are you asking this? Or you know that you're about to get pitched or something. The reason for my call today is insert sales pitch.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. It's stuff that we learn. They're phrases, and our brain will either tell us to lean in, or run.
Mhm.
It's almost like the new fight or flight.
I think of that
Whether it's
TikTok noise, "Run, da na
yeah,
na na na."
and that doesn't matter if it's your inbox, on email, LinkedIn, text messages, phone calls, anywhere.
Mhm.
We see too many patterns, and the brain is really good at pattern recognition, and this is what changed. With the volume, our brains got smarter. So we start to pick up on clues faster. And now, you think of these VPs that you're prioritizing in your calls, this is why it's so hard to get a pickup, and when you do, why they shut you down so fast, because they've heard the same shit over and over and over again. And the problem is most companies teach you to go and figure out if there's a need.
Mm.
The problem is it's not relevant unless you know there's a need. And so you got to hit on something really fast in the first 10 seconds, or you're gone. And this is why the numbers with social selling have got really interesting, is because of intent. And I'm not saying that social selling is the only way to hit intent, but it's almost like should I tell my doctor story?
Yeah, sure, go for it. This is so good.
So Morgan, I went to the doctor 2 weeks ago. I don't know if I told you.
Mm.
Yeah, it was super weird. Before I even told him what was wrong, he told me that I had a major heart condition and then I'd have to go and pay for this expensive surgery. Seemed a little odd to me that he would make that recommendation without a diagnosis. So I left. This morning I got my fifth call. And you know what he said to me?
Oh, what did he say?
Usually by the fifth call, people are ready to buy. So I would hope you have your credit card ready because I got my scalpel and everything in the operating room ready. So let's go.
Uh,
Hmm.
It's so much how sellers sell though, right, Nick?
And I don't blame the sellers because that's it. You look at the numbers and they're like people like
Mhm.
money's in the follow up, and they go in. It's a misdirection. It's not true. Yes, there's money in the follow up, but only if they were worth calling in the first place and following up. And so what is happening with old school prospecting is it really pushes the hustle.
Mhm.
And as you guys know my story, the hustle almost killed me, and I had to go and rethink things because it was literally life or death. And
Mhm.
what I realized is that the best actually, I don't know if I told this before, but when I started doing my research, I was like, who the hell is actually crushing it without killing themselves in the process? Did I ever tell you this, Morgan?
Yeah, uh-huh, you've told me this.
And it was people with families
Mhm.
because they had hard cutoffs. And so they had to make every minute count when they were at work because they did not have any additional time. So what did they do? Well, they time blocked, which I had never heard of before, funny enough. You think that would just be something we learned from school and, make use your time properly. But they also were excellent marketers, great copywriters, and they tested long before they asked for a meeting.
The off-Broadway idea, yeah.
Super interesting. I was like, well, why, these you have this list of 100 people. Why did you cross off these 50? Well, when I tested them with this messaging, they didn't respond to it, meaning that it's not relevant right now. So instead of burning that bridge, I'd rather keep it there and I'd focus on these 50 because there's a likelihood that it's going to work out. And so whether you want to call it disqualify early, I call it let's qualify the list before we start dialing.
And I wanna get there because there's some important, like, tactical hows on that, which is related to the topic today, but I don't wanna lose a thread that you were saying earlier, which is the brick wall, the mental spam filter. This is really important because at first it was like an idea for us. It was just something that we had seen a couple of times. We're like, hey, it seems if you think about it, if you just go back to like first principles reasoning and you think about there's only so many buyers in a market for a particular service. Okay. So let's say in your total market, there are 1,000 VPs who would ever say yes to whatever you have to sell. Could be a little larger, could be a little less. But then there are hundreds of companies trying to sell to those VPs. So the question is, do the VPs actually pay attention? Like if every VP is getting an automated email or a follow up sequence or some sort of nurture thing or get called, how many touch points are they getting, not from one company, but from every company? And how do they deal with that? And the truth is, as we started to talk with more executives, not just VPs, these are CEOs, CXO people, also sometimes directors, also sometimes managers, they get so many touch points from all of these different companies begging for their attention that they just start to tune it out. They say, it's not even worth my time and energy to say no. I'm just not going to respond. And I remember we were talking with an SVP once, and he had said that he gets 200 email pitches in his inbox every day. Think about that.
And that's just one channel.
That's one channel to one VP at one company, an SVP actually. So the problem is not necessarily that your messaging is off, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about how are we talking to our prospects? What is the hook? Chances are they're not even going to look. Not it's not personal either. It is the environment that has been created through automation mostly, in which people now have this in their brain. They have the brick wall. They say I'm not going to pay attention anymore, and so they don't pay attention at
I want to
all.
I want to tie this into this question. That's a lot of research to qualify better. No. So I can't remember who said it. I'll have to scroll and without trying to find it quickly. It was the top sell. Oh, Crunchbase. The top sellers spend an average of 6 hours every week researching their prospects. So the one thing that I've noticed that's been really interesting is when I started going through even just lists of 20 people, the 20 accounts that sellers were targeting, going back to that 50% couldn't buy, 50%, nobody actually looked at the serviceability. So one company in particular, I was trying to help an SDR that was really struggling, and they only integrate with Salesforce.
Mm.
just under 50% of their list were HubSpot.
Oh no.
And they'd been given this list 2 months ago, and they'd been calling it eagerly ever since.
Mm.
But this is what I mean, like, there's little things, if we reverse engineer is, even if they had the money, could they use it? Is the first question to ask yourself. Can time to value, if they how much change is required for them to see that value? Well, if it's changing their entire CRM, or if they're a Microsoft shop and you only work with Google, these are the little things, that serviceable market that you need to qualify first before they end up on your list, or else this is what adds to the mental spam filters. So it's little things, but even with in writing they call it a bifurcation,
Hmm.
that you divide people. So if you're talking about content and you're putting it out in the world and you keep talking about Google, 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 or HubSpot, 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 people that are using that will come to you,
Hmm.
especially if it's getting in their way of doing what they want to do. But it's these little things. And you talk about a lot of research, it doesn't take a lot. What what is a hard thing to do is do a win-loss analysis over the last year, take the 5 biggest that you won, 5 fastest that you won, and the most recent 5 that you lost, and map it back. What was the same? What function typically did you lead with? What seniority level was the champion? What title did they have? Bifurcation. I think
Uh,
it's
BI. F.
Bifurcation.
Yeah, it's very close to that. Yeah. Yep. Bifurcation.
Very close, that you bugger.
I think there's an extra I in there, but anyways,
Maybe,
it
I don't
doesn't.
know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Anyways, but it honestly, it's little things. If you go and just make sure they can buy, honestly, you'll be twice as effective, because that's what we're seeing, is that 50% of the people couldn't buy if they wanted to, and that's it.
And the compound note on this, Nick, which you taught me a lot, and what I think about now more than anything, is
Uh-oh. Do I need
what?
earmuffs for this?
No, I know it's a dangerous thing, but what's the problem that you actually solve,
Yeah, is it
and
worth solving?
is it worth solving? Because the thing is, and we see this a lot with sellers. We see this a lot in sales training. You get to know about all the cool things that your product does. And probably, I hope you got some training about your ICPs and ideal client personas. And those sometimes they're called, they have all different kinds of titles in different sales orgs. Sometimes you get trained on who your economic buyers are and who your champions are, and maybe the right kinds of people that you tend to talk to, or the people who are likely to sign off on a deal. I hope that you got that training. And if you don't, then you need to talk to somebody in your company, because that's goodness. But the thing that knowing a lot
Companies
about
get
your
trained on
product,
that?
I know. The thing that a lot of companies don't train on is the actual problems that you solve. And what I've
Yeah, those
learned to think about, the things that I've learned about problems is that they aren't actually like, oh gosh, I can't accelerate my pipeline. Okay. Nobody, if this is the parrot test, which I had posted about the other day, nobody ever, I guarantee you, has banged down somebody's door screaming, God, I wish you could just help me accelerate my pipeline. Like, nobody actually goes out into the world and asks for that. There's a lot of marketing gobbledygook that focuses on that.
Morgan,
But
you know what? It really bugs me when I open up my CRM or you know, my enablement platform, and I go to start dialing, and I just don't know where to start and who to call. Yeah, I got accounts, but who? When
right.
should I call them? What channel should I use? Like, I'm sitting there pulling my hair out and wondering if I'm gonna get fired tomorrow because I have this information and it means nothing to me.
And so there are really two kinds of problems. There are problems that are related to workflows that people are experiencing, but they don't necessarily know how to solve. So that's exactly what Nick just said. I'm already doing X, but I think I can do X better, but I don't really know how to do X better, and I know it's kind of contributing to problems, but I'm not really sure how to do it. The naughtier, like KNO TTY, like a tree knot. I get in trouble for
I
saying naughtier.
I was
It's
I was really wondering where you were going. I was like, "You do realize what platform we're on, right?" I don't know what.
yeah. The more how about tricky? Is tricky better? The trickier kinds of problems are the kinds of problems that your buyers aren't aware that they're even having because they aren't necessary. They it's nothing to do with their existing workflow. It would be introducing something new, some new change management, or basically you have to manage the change, some new way of doing business, some new way of actually working inside their organization that's brand new. And just to be frank, a lot of SaaS products are in bucket two because the SaaS product is a cool idea that doesn't relate to anybody's existing problem. And so sellers have a hard time articulating to buyers why they need to solve this problem
So
because
they
the
end up
product
selling into
itself.
bucket 3, which is bucket 3 is they're prestigious accounts that look great, and I want to sell to them.
Yes,
Not because there's a hidden need, not because there is a need, but because I have a need to sell.
I have a need to sell.
And you
Correct.
see how with change management, this gets you in trouble. Did I ever tell you what I used to call this
What
when I
did
was
you
figuring this out?
what did you call this?
The bro test.
Oh no. What's the bro test?
If you were sitting with buddies, because
Uh-huh.
that's back when we'd go out and drink after a crap day in the bullpen, and we would complain about what was going on. Would you ever hear your product messaging in a complaint?
Mm.
That was the
Oof.
bro test. And so this is gold if you want to talk about how to go and talk about qualification. So the easiest low hanging fruit, which is the 3%, is they're problem aware and they're already bitching about it.
Yep.
Honestly, this if you can go and find a problem aware poster or you can find somebody that's complaining where on whatever platform, boom. Number
Get them.
2 is there's signs and symptoms that you can find with a software, but they don't know what they mean. And once you connect the dots, they can never unsee it.
I have an analogy for this, Nick, which is very useful.
Ooh.
I drive an old car. Okay? It is it's a 1999 Toyota 4Runner. It's got 250,000 miles on it or something ridiculous. She's running great. The problem is the check engine light comes on very frequently. If you don't have a little reader, right? You can buy these. But even if you have them, you may not understand what it says. So you bring it into a shop, right? So that they can plug it in and they can look at this they can look at the issues in their little reader and they say, "Oh, yeah, this is a sensor that's off." And I have this O2 sensor that's just totally janky. So some wiring is completely off. But here, yeah, I have this problem, but now I've gotten used to the fact that my check engine light comes on. So until I bring in my car for service, I don't ask people to look at it, right? I don't I don't ask people to check the check engine lights anymore because I know, oh, this is sort of a problem. So what kind of issues does that open me up to? What if there's some other problem that isn't this little minor sensor that this check engine light turns on for, right? These signs and symptoms of pain or of a problem inside of a car, inside of an organization, inside of a company or a market, it's our obligation as like auto mechanics in some ways to help buyers see, yes, this is a problem. This sign or symptom doesn't occur unless you're struggling with X. And hey, by the way, there's a solution to X. But those signs and symptoms are rarely taught. And the tricky part of it is actually validating those signs and symptoms in market.
You
So,
mean when you go to court, you need proof?
do
I didn't
you want to
know.
give some examples, Nick, of what like inside a sales motion, what the signs and symptoms would look like?
So if I was on LinkedIn and I have let's say LinkedIn's an account that I'm working,
Okay.
and I see that they just did a bulk hire of SDRs.
Hmm.
What is that telling you? What
Probably
might be they
there.
be prioritizing? What would be that invest It's an investment, so they're
It's an
investing
investment.
into it. So what are they hoping to get from that investment? What's the targeted ROI?
Probably new business, net new logos.
top of funnel, right?
Top of funnel.
So what happens if they were hiring AEs instead?
Hmm. Middle of funnel maybe, or strategic expansion into some
What
vertical.
what if they just hired a whole bunch of engineers but no salespeople? And it's been 6 months since they hired those engineers. I haven't seen a product roll out, which I went to go and validate and I couldn't find, and no salespeople got hired and no marketers.
Sounds like they're trying to figure out something technical
Or
inside the
maybe
company.
or maybe they're just building that technical piece,
Hmm.
but maybe they haven't thought about how they're gonna roll it out fast enough to make it pay for itself. So you could even ask like, "Oh, are you building this? I saw you've been hiring a lot of engineering. Just curious. Are you looking to roll it out with existing customers? Because if you were looking to do it with new customers, I don't know why you didn't start hiring yet. Maybe we should
Juicy.
talk."
Juicy, juicy.
But this is what happens is when we start looking for these signs and symptoms, it has to be turned into a story. It has to be turned into a narrative. Nobody says, "Oh, shit, I just need to buy a CRM today." It's like, man, every time I go and try to go in, somebody calls me on my cell phone. I get this number and I have no freaking clue who it is because they're calling me back. And I can't, I'm trying to figure out what I said before, but it was 4 hours earlier. I wish there was some way to do that. It's super annoying. What if you had a CRM integration that locked in with your phone, picked up that number, and it popped up as they called you?
That'd be cool.
That, yeah, tell me more.
But to your point, Nick, the pushback, which I know we always get, is like, well, but there are buyers who do wake up and realize that they need to buy a CRM. Yeah, 3%. Like 3% of your market at any one time is going to actually be in market for a solution. So if you and you're probably already competing with your competitors by that point that they're in market. So the question is, how do you reach the 97% who aren't in market yet? And by the numbers, likely something like 40-ish or a little more percent are actually open to change. They just don't know what to do yet, right?
So if we go and take that, so take your original example of VP of sales, 1,000.
Yeah.
30 people would be willing to buy. How much of that other
Mm.
970 would you burn in the process, heckling them, giving them messaging they don't care about? Do you know what they call that? Spam. So now
Yep.
you've lost the opportunity to ever talk to them again. And most managers and leaders don't care, but it's your
Mhm.
reputation that gets burned. And when we take this other approach to trying to go and tease out a solution, lead with a hypothesis that it's a big enough problem that's frequent that, whoever's working in that workflow or in that function is bitching about it to someone,
Yes, they
or hasn't got the promotion they deserved, or they're worried they're going to get fired, or there's something weighing on their brain but they don't know why it's there, something that's stopping them from advancing. That's gold. And that is why top down is so hard right now, is because people have abused calling VPs and C-suite above the power line. And who's the most approachable? Below the power line. And below the power line is where the problem is felt. And so VPs might see that there's a problem with revenue, but how the hell do you dig through that
are.
haystack to find that needle? And what you're doing is you're coming to them with a needle and saying, "Hey, I talked to so and so, and they said that they just have no idea with the tools that they currently have, they are wasting more time researching to go and figure out a reason to call. And then when they get on the phone because they don't have a reason, they're trying to dig and nothing happens. What if they had a real reason to call?"
And it's not just hiring either that are reasons, right? Here are some other interesting reasons that could indicate signs or symptoms. But remember, our job here is not just to look at a sign and symptom and then spin up an automation and messaging on it, right? The point is to construct a business case. Basically, what Nick is doing is a business case, a mental model about why that company is deciding to behave a certain way or why certain things are happening. So for example, maybe they just did a whole website refresh, brand new, maybe visual brand. That's a sign They're investing something in marketing. They're thinking about, okay, how can we connect with our customers better? Maybe you sell into that workflow. Increase in negative or positive reviews on G2. Maybe you sell something customer success related, and you can use the spate of negative reviews on G2 in the last 3 months as a trigger, an observation. Hey, looks like maybe your success team isn't as good as you think it is. I wouldn't obviously use that language, but like thinking about the business case here. Obviously, the classics of change in management, turnover at an executive level, um, but
New role,
new roles. So yeah, the either a new executive role, new hiring,
new
um,
function.
huge, especially. And as you work into larger companies, especially public ones, you can use public financial info to look at how their quarters are going and whether they're hitting their revenue targets. But even beyond that, think about technographics, like what Nick was saying earlier. Are they already using a certain tool? There are plenty of websites out there that will tell you, does this website have a certain, like Hotjar? Are they currently measuring the ways that people are interacting with their website? What does that indicate about marketing management? Or
What are they
uh,
advertising?
are they advertising? Right. On which channels? Is all of these things, depending upon what you sell and who you sell into, allow you to observe as an outsider, say, huh, maybe this is true inside this company, or maybe even better yet, this seems generally true across these 20 companies. So I'm going to create, and I love the word that you use, Nick, a hypothesis, and I'm going to go ask them to prove it wrong.
I feel like Sherlock Holmes. The first time I
Mhm.
watched Sherlock Holmes and he like knows what to do in the fight, I'm like, that's how I feel prospecting because I did my research. You're gonna ask me this question. Why? Like, well, like the accusation audit's a really good one too.
Ooh, say
If
more about
you're
that.
if you're prospecting into a really big account that you can't afford to screw up, do an accusation audit to go and figure out how they would challenge you. This is something I didn't know when I was a junior in sales. Good prospects challenge you,
Hmm.
and it's actually healthy and it's a good sign. The people that don't challenge you at all, you're in trouble. So those people that are challenging you and challenge your customer and that they call it a mobilizer. So with that mobilizer, what would they be asking you? How sure? How much? How long?
Is it actually
Like,
going to work?
is it going to work? How long will it take for me to go and see that work? How much will I have to change to go and see that value?
Why
Why should I
you?
prioritize this over the other 17,000 things that are sitting in my emails and my inbox and my text messages and blah, 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 blah.
All of those questions.
And then once you do, then it's kind of fun because I then it feels like the beautiful mind where you're like you can see the writing on the wall and you're designing this masterpiece. And then and I almost feel like when you're like presenting it, you're like, oh, like, look what I found in a conversation, not in one thing I'll add in. Gong did topic analysis.
Hmm.
Going back into your feature conversation and kind of tying into this for the business case, top performers in discovery talked about features less than 9% of the time. Bottom performers talked about it more than 20% of the time.
Hmm.
So more than double. And in presentations, top performers would talk about features about 19% of the time. Bottom performers would be more than 31%.
Hmm.
I'm sensing a trend.
Yeah, I'm sensing a trend too. But and actually, let's just Daisy had commented, I'm currently selling into HR business unit. So here, let's just use this as an example. Um, what an accusation audit would be, who's the primary, stakeholder in that HR business unit? And then the accusation audit, maybe it's the director of HR, maybe it's a VP of people, maybe it's a COO. What are the questions that they are going to ask about this change? About whatever you're trying to sell into. I mean, even software, right? Like, the thing that can I drop a hot take as I'm answering this? Am I allowed to,
Yeah.
Nick?
That one was from zendesk.com on one of their reports, but I'll go in I'll do a post later today and I'll share all the resources in the comments. I'll pin it.
Okay. Anyways, can I drop a hot, spicy take?
No.
Okay. Never mind. Sorry,
Yeah,
Daisy.
go fire away.
the A PLG is great, and I'm excited to see more B2B companies shift to PLG when it's appropriate, particularly if you're software. However,
Oh, yeah, you had a spicy take on this, that's right.
as
How
you
PLG
move
will
into
fail.
larger companies, move into larger organizations, PLG is not going to save your ass. There is a reason Asana has enterprise sales teams still on outbound. There there are reasons why companies who are product led for most of us still have outbound sales functions, whether they report to marketing or sales, who cares, that prospect into larger organizations. And the reason is PLG is not a silver bullet for customer acquisition. Because when you work with larger teams, there's what's Challenger's data on this year? There's 13 to 22
Oh,
people on the
yeah.
buying committee.
In tech, because it spans so many different functions and seniority with the
Mhm.
buying decision, that it's 13 to 22 buyers in SaaS for a SaaS product right now in 2022. Holy crap.
So if you're trying to, sell beyond one person or sell beyond a few people or a small little team, you're going to have more insight into the pains, the problems, the signs, the symptoms of the organization and why they are a good fit because most of the time, again, 97%, those buyers are not aware or are not in market for a solution. So our job is to teach them in some way, to show them, to challenge them that they need to change their minds about why they should solve the problem differently, why they need us. And chances are, why they need us has very little to do with the cool little button you can click in the bottom right hand side. Back to the feature data that Nick was talking about. It's about how it changes that way that organization works and how it changes the
Ooh.
problems that the organization has.
So one of the most amazing, interesting things that like validated my earthquake analogy is I was calling into a company, and instead of starting right at the epicenter where it was the highest, most frequent pain and the highest pain, I started outside in the ripples of where it was another department. But the thing I found really interesting is I was curious if they realized one of the reasons why they were struggling was because of this other department.
Ooh.
So I said, I was just looking at your sales department and I see that you're getting just blasted in every review site for garbage, that your product is horrible. And I can't help but think everything I see is because it was sold to the wrong customer. So you guys are getting downgraded and probably your pay's on the line, if not your job. John, want to go and would you like some data so we can go and battle sales to go and eliminate that?
Mhm.
And I called the manager, and the manager was going to bat in 2 weeks and asked if I could help him bring that data. Guess who
Mhm.
got the deal?
Mhm.
And I wrote it in with a manager, and they took me to C-suite and championed it the whole way. A manager championed it, not a director, not a VP, a manager, and carried the whole way through. So seniority doesn't mean what it always used to.
And I think this is the important part what you just talked about. Sometimes it can feel like this is an account-based only approach, but it doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
right? It Yes, we need some understanding of per account, particularly on larger accounts we're prospecting into, the signs and symptoms. But um you're not dumb and chances are you're going to learn over time what works and what doesn't, and you can take those lessons. Did this manager respond to this inquiry in the way that I thought they would? Yes. Okay. So let me go try this on another manager in a similar role at a different company. Did they respond in the way that I thought they would? Yes. Okay, now let's
Winning.
try 15 managers across 15 different accounts and see if they respond in the same way. Oh my gosh, 10 or 11 of them did. Okay, I think I'm onto something. And I think that this is a pattern that I can use across multiple different companies.
And
So,
maybe automate at that point
and
not
maybe
before.
automated at that point. Yes, Nick. Because the the point is, um, and to kind of be just to be transparent with everybody, like the main problem with prospecting right now is that we assume people care about us, which is not true, and that they care about the product that we have to sell, which is also not true. So our job is to validate what people care about. That's back to this problem, pain, sign, symptom. What do they care about? They can't, gosh, it's just taken so much time. We have this initiative from our executive to try and transform the way that we report our pipeline, our sales. We have a new VP of sales, and she wants reporting to look like this, but we can't do that right now inside HubSpot. Okay, maybe you sell something that can help them do that, or whatever. So you are helping validate that that is the case, and then you're taking those lessons and turning it into a campaign. But that campaign is not to your entire market either. It's again, once again, to a list of companies that exhibit similar signs and symptoms.
So Riley had just mentioned they care about themselves. Care is a feeling, which
Hmm.
is so ironic. When we get taught to go and prospect, we get taught to deal with logic
Hmm.
and logical sequencing. They're like, well, logically, if you have a sales team, you need to sell shit. Thank you, Captain Obvious. But when we lean with feelings, the emotional, and why people aren't getting promotions, why they're pissed off, why they're struggling to get their job done, and the status quo is broken, but they don't know because they're just trying to, get to today and take the weekend off because they're not paid enough to care. When we lean into the feelings first, that's when people decide to champion, and then later we're building the logic in to go take it upstairs. But if we lead with logic right away, that's why a lot of the time there's no drive. But when we add the emotion, especially when there's a high emotion, when people are pissed off or super happy or something of that nature, strong feelings gets shit done. That's why trigger events are so important. Somebody just got financing, somebody just went and regulation into, like, if you're following your industry and the government has regulation and now it's going to be a new tax code or they have new guidelines for legal or whatever, that's going to piss a few people off. And if you can help them, that's
Hmm.
what'll accelerate your pipeline, augment it, whatever you want to. It gets the job done, and people actually appreciate your call because they've been trying to figure it out. And if you're actively doing that at a scale and learning faster, it's exactly why Amazon AWS became a thing. They realized that something they were really good at to go and build their e-commerce store was something that other people couldn't do easily. So they offered it as a service, and AWS was born. Little things become big things fast if you pay attention.
And this is also why I think social has proven and continues to be proven as a fertile place for sellers to hang out.
I may have stats on this.
Okay, one second. I just have one note. The main problem that we continue to see is that people talk about social as if you need to be like a solopreneur or an entrepreneur. You need to be a coach, or you need to have a course to offer, or whatever else. You, the individual, you need to, spare me, build your personal brand. Ugh. The point of social is it's another channel, right? And in fact, it's a high value relationship oriented channel. It is a strong emotional channel because people don't use LinkedIn, for example, to organize the way that they work for their day. They do use their email in that way. They don't necessarily accomplish their job on LinkedIn, right? They use their phone to do that. Why do they
Ooh.
show up on LinkedIn? They show up because their peers are there. They show up
And
to learn, to be inspired, to engage.
I was listening to something by the wonderful Anne Hanley,
Mm,
and she said if your content is focused only on your product, it's not content, it's an advertisement.
dead on and
I was like,
Hanley.
oh,
It's true because
I made
what
that mistake. That's where I started.
but
It's like the
the
living
point
ad
is
reel.
right. Yeah, I mean, but like the point of social, the reason it works is because people are here, people show up because this is where their peers are, or they want to keep up on industry news, or they want to see what people are up to. And most people don't engage. Most people don't comment. Most people don't like by the numbers. It's like 90% of people are lurkers. Uh, 9% are engagers. Only 1% actually post original content. We're posters, right? We create our own original content, but
Is
it's
that
actually
poster or poser? Just maybe clarify.
poster. But the value of this channel is that if you want an introduction to somebody inside of a company and you don't have their phone number or their email, or you know they're probably not going to pay attention to that, or they don't know you yet, what an amazing opportunity. You have some
I
data though, Nick?
Yeah, just to kind of tie that in. Back in the day when, we couldn't breach people's privacy and get stuff that we had no business getting without talking to them, we had to go and either show up or do other things like networking and try to show up where they were going to be. One of my favorite things to do was bring coffee and donuts to the smoke pit.
Mhm.
Man, you want to talk about getting the dirt.
You'll get all of it.
And
And
I don't know how many times people I've been walked into the office after taken directly to the VP's office, sat there and had an hour meeting after having a conversation, just listening to the different functions complain about what's going on, and boom.
Mhm. And Natalie had commented 1%, that's it. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there's 142 million users of LinkedIn in North America. So 1% says there's 1.4 million content creators. That's a lot of people. That actually might be a little bit high, right? When you think about your feeds, how many names are you seeing? You're not seeing probably more, and also it's like algorithmically tailored, so there's some of that. But you're probably not seeing more than 500 names
I'll
in
build a
a
lead
news feed.
list, and
Yeah.
you'll see how many people don't post on a regular
Yeah.
basis or
Create a lead
repost
list.
company advertising, and you're like, ugh.
Ugh.
Okay,
Anyways.
we're in the last couple minutes, so I'll go over my numbers. So I found these incredibly fascinating. So if you want, comment somebody in that needs to hear this, that needs to see why social first is a legitimate option.
Mhm.
Tag them in because then they'll get the timestamp. Okay. Social sellers are 66% more likely to reach quota than using traditional prospecting techniques. Additionally, 78% of salespeople that make use of social, and that's even for just research, outsell their peers. 78%. By taking advantage of social selling, companies can increase their win rates by 5%. And that's okay. But this is the part that I love because it comes down to trust and credibility plus that change management because they've been following for a while. It actually increases their deal size by 35%.
Wow.
I would much rather work less deals and sell more. Like, think of the quality of service you're going to bring and the amount of attention you can give. Hell yeah. Now, I found this interesting too. They actually broke down B2B buyers and where they were hanging out.
Mhm.
So, right now, LinkedIn is 80.3%. So, when companies play on all the platforms, they're getting 80.3% on average from LinkedIn, 12.7% from Twitter. That may have just changed, and 6.7% from Facebook.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Mhm. Talk about a sandbox to play in. But this is but, like, can we I just wanna note this as we close out today. The reason that these numbers exist and that I'm not surprised by any of those data points is it's because we are bypassing the brick wall. We are bypassing the mental spam filter. How do you why do you tune out some people, but you don't tune out others? Well, because you trust them, because they're
Or they're
credible.
interesting.
Or they're interesting, right? You know the reason you read that one blog is because it's funny. The reason you watch that one YouTube creator is you like their style. The reason you follow somebody on TikTok is because their content speaks to something in you, right? So the reason that it works on LinkedIn is because you've shown up in a way and you're showing up in a way that prospects want to interact with and you're building that credibility on the front end. So when you've identified signs and symptoms and all the rest of it that we talked about earlier today, shooting a DM to somebody you've interacted with over, let's say, 90 days, over 3 months, saying, "Hey, I just noticed this. Is that true?" That's a very different conversation than a cold call. And certainly cold
Or
calls
just a
at
cold
scale,
DM or an
or
in-mail.
totally true. Um, well, Nick, do you want to close this out then?
Yeah. So, we have some really interesting topics that are coming up thanks to you guys. And so get in our DMs, jump in the comments, and if there's something, whether you don't have anybody that's supporting you or you're not getting the training you deserve, hit us up in the DMs and let us know what you're looking to learn. We are updating our content to go and give you even more resources. I heard that there's going to be worksheets too. but I'm not sure. And honestly, guys, we couldn't have done it without you because of your feedback that makes that possible. And as you guys know, it is 2022, almost 2023. It is no longer okay to suffer in silence. If you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, whether it's hitting quota or even just dealing with rejection of being in sales, we've all been there. We've all been there, right?
Yep.
You don't need to buy anything. Get into our DM, shoot us a connection request, ask for help, and we will make sure that you get the resources you need so that you can enjoy this profession that we all love. Thank you so much for joining us today. It means the world. And if you want to tag a friend in that hasn't heard of us before, we can't wait to see you next week. Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.